Basically, Robert Hoge was just ugly. He was born with a tumor in the middle of his face, which squished his eyes out farther apart than they were supposed to be. And his legs were all tangled up and did not grow properly, so they were too small. And he was missing 3 toes when he was 5 days old. Basically, just make sure everything else inside was working properly. And thankfully, everything was properly working. Or his mom already knew that there was something wrong with him. She just had that gut feeling. And she didn't want to see him, so they took him away. And she refused to see him until a week after he was born. And when she saw him, she just said that he's the ugliest person she's ever seen, and she did not want that to be her child. So after a few more weeks of talking to other doctors and her family, she went to her other 4 children, and together as a family they decided to keep Robert. So a month and 5 days after he was born, he finally returned home. When Robert was about 2 years old, he got his left leg amputated right below the knee. Then he got a prosthetic leg, but then turns out that his left leg was then longer than his right leg. So he didn't learn to walk till he was about 3 years old, but he was very good at just simply crawling around without his prosthetic legs. Or he was proposed this big surgery that would potentially help him fit in better. So their plan was to really just make him less ugly. And they were also going to amputate his right leg, giving him 2 prosthetic legs, and using the muscle and tissue and bones from his right toe to make him a nose, because he did not have a nose after the tumor was removed. In the end, it took about 20 people, like surgeons, doctors, nurses, all that stuff, and it took about 12 hours for the whole procedure to be done. He bled out a lot. Basically what they did was they split right down the middle of his head, and they cut like his skull open a little apart. And they went in and pushed his eyes closer together. They also amputated his right leg right under the knee. And they took the tissue and bones and muscle from his toes to build him a new nose, because after getting the tumor replaced, he didn't have a nose anymore. Obviously, the surgery was good. He lived. But afterwards, he had all sorts of different illnesses and infections for about a year, and he was in the hospital a lot. So leading into that, he barely made the cutoff to go into the first year of school, being that he was about 5 years old when he was finally ready to leave. And at that point, practicing the hospital, he was able to walk on both his prosthetic legs, and he went to school the first day with all his other siblings. He had a hard time making friends, but in his first few weeks of school, he did make one friend named David. And they continued being friends all throughout the rest of their school years. But throughout school, he did get a lot of nicknames. And the only one that really still bothers him to this day is Tonos, because he knows that it's true. And it's just something people, how he described it was kids who are called Four Eyes because of wearing glasses. At least a bunch of other kids wear glasses too. But when he's called Tonos, it's true, but he can't relate to anybody else. So that always was one that really bothered him. And now, obviously, he wrote a book about himself, his childhood and stuff. So he's had a pretty good life. He's somewhat successful. And yeah. The end.